Book 11, Part 2 of the Aeneid. The Aeneid, by Publius Virgilius Maro, translated by John Dryden. Book 11, Debaters and a Warrior Girl, Part 2. These words, so full of malice mixed with art, inflamed with rage the youthful hero's heart. Then, groaning from the bottom of his breast, he heaved to wind, and thus his wrath expressed: "You, Drances, never want a stream of words. Then, when the public need requires our swords, first in the council hall to steer the state, and ever foremost in a tongue debate, while our strong walls secure us from the foe, ere yet with blood our ditches overflow. But let the potent orator declaim, and with the brand of coward blot my name. Free leave is given him, when his fatal hand has covered with more corpse the Sandrian strand, and high as mine his towering trophies stand. If any doubt remains who dares the most, let us decide it at the Trojan's cost, and issue both abreast, where honour calls. Foes are not far to seek without the walls, unless his noisy tongue can only fight, and feet were given him but to speed his flight. I beaten from the field? I forced away? Who, but so known a dastard, dares to say? Had he but e'en beheld the fight, his eyes had witnessed for me what his tongue denies. What heaps of Trojans by this hand were slain, and how the bloody Tiber swell'd the main! All saw but he, the Arcadian troops retire in scattered squadrons, and their prince expire. The giant brothers in their camp have found I was not forced with ease to quit my ground. Not such the Trojans tried me, when, inclosed, I singly their united arms opposed. First forced an entrance through their thick array, then, glutted with their slaughter, freed my way. 'Tis a destructive war? So let it be, but to the Phrygian pirate and to thee. Meantime proceed to fill the people's ears with false reports, their minds with panic fears. Extol the strength of a twice conquered race, our foes encourage and our friends debase. Believe thy fables, and the Trojan town triumphant stands. The Grecians are o'erthrown. Suppliant at Hector's feet Achilles lies, and Diomed from fierce Aeneas flies. Say rapid Aufidus with awful dread runs backward from the sea, and hides his head, when the great Trojan on his bank appears. For that's as true as thy dissembled fears of my revenge. Dismiss that vanity. Thou, Drances, art below a death from me. Let that vile soul in that vile body rest. The lodging is well worthy of the guest. Now, royal father, to the present state of our affairs, and of this high debate. If in your arms thus early you divide, and think your fortune is already tried, if one defeat has brought us down so low as never more in fields to meet the foe, then I conclude for peace 'tis time to treat, and lie like vassals at the victor's feet. But oh, if any ancient blood remains, one drop of all our fathers in our veins, that man would I prefer before the rest, who dared his death with an undaunted breast, who comely fell by no dishonest wound, to shun that sight, and, dying, gnawed the ground. But if we still have fresh recruits in store, if our confederates can afford us more, if the contended field we bravely fought, and not a bloodless victory was bought, their losses equaled ours, and for their slain with equal fires they filled the shining plain, why thus unforced should we so tamely yield, and, ere the trumpet sounds, resign the field? Good unexpected, evils unforeseen, appear by turns, as fortune shifts the scene. Some, raised aloft, come tumbling down amain, then fall so hard, they bound and rise again. If Diomed refuse his aid to lend, the great Messapus yet remains our friend. Tolumnius, who foretells events, is ours. The Italian chiefs and princes join their powers, nor least in number, nor in name the last. Your own brave subjects have your cause embraced. Above the rest, the Volscian Amazon contains an army in herself alone, and heads a squadron, terrible to sight, with glittering shields, in brazen armour bright. Yet, if the foe a single fight demand, and I alone the public peace withstand, if you consent, he shall not be refused, nor find the hand to victory unused. This new Achilles, let him take the field, with fated armour, and Vulcanian shield. For you, my royal father, and my fame, I, Turnus, not the least of all my name, devote my soul. He calls me hand to hand, and I alone will answer his demand. Drances shall rest secure, and neither share the danger, nor divide the prize of war. While they debate, nor these nor those will yield. Aeneas draws his forces to the field, and moves his camp. The scouts with flying speed return, and through the frighted city spread th' unpleasing news, the Trojans are descried, in battle marching by the river side, and bending to the town. They take th' alarm, some tremble, some are bold, all in confusion arm. The impetuous youth press forward to the field, they clash the sword, and clatter on the shield. The fearful matrons raise a screaming cry, old feeble men with fainter groans reply. A jarring sound results, and mingles in the sky, like that of swans, remurmuring to the floods, or birds of diff'ring kinds in hollow woods. Turnus the occasion takes, and cries aloud, "Talk on, you quaint haranguers of the crowd! Declaim in praise of peace, when danger calls, and the fierce foes in arms approach the walls." He said, and turning short with speedy pace, casts back a scornful glance, and quits the place. Thou, Volusus, the Volscian troops command to mount, and lead thyself our Ardean band. Messapus and Catillus post your force along the fields, to charge the Trojan horse. Some guard the passes, others man the wall. Drawn up in arms, the rest attend my call. They swarm from every quarter of the town, and with disordered haste the rampires crown. Good old Latinus, when he saw too late the gathering storm just breaking on the state, dismissed the council till a fitter time, and owned his easy temper as his crime, who, forced against his reason, had complied to break the treaty for the promised bride. Some help to sink new trenches, others aid to ram the stones or raise the palisade. Hoarse trumpets sound the alarm, around the walls runs a distracted crew, whom their last labour calls. A sad procession in the streets is seen, of matrons, that attend the mother queen. High in her chair she sits, and, at her side, with downcast eyes, appears the fatal bride. They mount the cliff, where Pallas' temple stands, pray'rs in their mouths, and presents in their hands. With censers first they fume the sacred shrine, then in this common supplication join: "O patroness of arms, unspotted maid, propitious hear, and lend thy Latins aid! Break short the pirate's lance, pronounce his fate, and lay the Phrygian low before the gate." Now Turnus arms for fight. His back and breast well-tempered steel and scaly brass invest. The cuishes which his brawny thighs enfold are mingled metal damasked o'er with gold. His faithful fauchion sits upon his side, nor casque nor crest his manly features hide. But, bare to view, amid surrounding friends, with godlike grace he from the tow'r descends. Exulting in his strength, he seems to dare his absent rival, and to promise war. Freed from his keepers, thus, with broken reins, the wanton courser prances o'er the plains, or in the pride of youth o'erleaps the mounds, and snuffs the females in forbidden grounds, or seeks his watering in the well-known flood, to quench his thirst, and cool his fiery blood. He swims luxuriant in the liquid plain, and over his shoulder flows his waving mane. He neighs, he snorts, he bears his head on high, before his ample chest the frothy waters fly. Soon as the prince appears without the gate, the Volscians, with their virgin leader, wait his last commands. Then, with a graceful mien, lights from her lofty steed the warrior queen. Her squadron imitates, and each descends, whose common suit Camilla thus commands: "If sense of honour, if a soul secure Of inborn worth, that can all tests endure, Can promise aught, or on itself rely, Greatly to dare, to conquer or to die, Then I alone, sustained by these, will meet the Tyrrhene troops, and promise their defeat. Ours be the danger, ours the sole renown. You, general, stay behind, and guard the town." Turnus a while stood mute with glad surprise, And on the fierce virago fix'd his eyes; Then thus return'd: "O grace of Italy, With what becoming thanks can I reply? Not only words lie lab'ring in my breast, But thought itself is by thy praise oppress'd. Yet rob me not of all, but let me join My toils, my hazard, and my fame with thine." The Trojan, not in stratagem unskill'd, Sends his light horse before to scour the field; Himself, through steep ascents and thorny brakes, A larger compass to the city takes. This news my scouts confirm, and I prepare To foil his cunning, and his force to dare; With chosen foot his passage to forelay, And place an ambush in the winding way. Thou with thy Volscians face the Tuscan horse; The brave Messapus shall thy troops enforce With those of Tibur and the Latian band, Subjected all to thy supreme command. This said, he warns Messapus to the war, Then every chief exhorts with equal care. All thus encourag'd, his own troops he joins, And hastes to prosecute his deep designs. Inclos'd with hills, a winding valley lies, By nature form'd for fraud, and fitted for surprise. A narrow track, by human steps untrode, Leads, through perplexing thorns, to this obscure abode. High o'er the vale a steepy mountain stands, Whence the surveying sight the nether ground commands. The top is level, an offensive seat Of war, and from the war a safe retreat. For, on the right and left, is room to press The foes at hand, or from afar distress; To drive 'em headlong downward, and to pour On their descending backs a stony show'r. Thither young Turnus took the well-known way, Possess'd the pass, and in blind ambush lay. Meantime Latonian Phoebe, from the skies, Beheld th' approaching war with hateful eyes, And call'd the light-foot Opis to her aid, Her most belov'd and ever trusty maid. Then with a sigh began: "Camilla goes to meet her death amidst her fatal foes. The nymphs I lov'd of all my mortal train, Invested with Diana's arms, in vain. Nor is my kindness for the virgin new; 'Twas born with her, and with her years it grew. Her father Metabus, when forced away From old Privernum for tyrannic sway, Snatch'd up, and saved from his prevailing foes, This tender babe, companion of his woes. Casmilla was our mother, but he drown'd One hissing letter in a softer sound, And call'd Camilla. Through the woods he flies, Wrapp'd in his robe the royal infant lies. His foes in sight, he mends his weary pace, With shout and clamours they pursue the chase. The banks of Amasene at length he gains. The raging flood his farther flight restrains, Raced o'er the borders with unusual rains. Prepar'd to plunge into the stream, he fears, Not for himself, but for the charge he bears. Anxious, he stops awhile, and thinks in haste; Then, desperate in distress, resolves at last. A knotty lance of well-boil'd oak he bore, The middle part with cork he cover'd o'er. He clos'd the child within the hollow space, With twigs of bending osier bound the case; Then pois'd the spear, heavy with human weight, And thus invoked my favour for the freight: "Accept, great goddess of the wood," and thus invoked my favour for the freight. "Accept, great goddess of the woods," he said, "Send by her sire this dedicated maid. Through air she flies a suppliant to thy shrine, And the first weapons that she knows are thine." He said, and with full force the spear he threw. Above the sounding waves Camilla flew. Then, press'd by foes, he stemm'd the stormy tide, And gain'd, by stress of arms, the farther side. His fasten'd spear he pull'd from out the ground, And, victor of his vows, his infant nymph unbound. Nor after that, in towns which walls inclose, Would trust his hunted life amidst his foes; But rough, in open air he chose to lie. Earth was his couch, his covering was the sky. On hills unshorn, or in a desert den, He shunn'd the dire society of men. A shepherd's solitary life he led; His daughter with the milk of mares he fed. The dugs of bears, and every salvage beast, He drew, and through her lips the liquor press'd. The little Amazon could scarcely go, he loads her with a quiver and a bow; and, that she might her staggering steps command, he with a slender javelin fills her hand. Her flowing hair no golden fillet bound, nor swept her trailing robe the dusty ground; instead of these, a tiger's hide overspread her back and shoulders, fastened to her head. The flying dart she first attempted to fling, and round her tender temples toss'd the sling; then, as her strength with years increased, began to pierce aloft in air the soaring swan, and from the clouds to fetch the heron and the crane. The Tuscan matrons with each other vied to bless their rival sons with such a bride. But she disdains their love, to share with me the sylvan shades and vowed virginity. And oh, I wish, contented with my cares of salvage spoils, she had not sought the wars. Then had she been of my celestial train, and shunned the fate that dooms her to be slain. But since, opposing heaven's decree, she goes to find her death among forbidden foes, haste with these arms and take thy steepy flight, where with the gods averse the Latins fight. This bow to thee, this quiver I bequeath, this chosen arrow to revenge her death. By whatever hand Camilla shall be slain, or of the Trojan or Italian train, let him not pass unpunish'd from the plain. Then, in a hollow cloud, myself will aid to bear the breathless body of my maid. Unspoil'd shall be her arms, and unprofaned her holy limbs with any human hand, and in a marble tomb laid in her native land. She said. The faithful nymph descends from high with rapid flight, and cuts the sounding sky. Black clouds and stormy winds around her body fly. By this, the Trojan and the Tuscan horse, drawn up in squadrons, with united force, approach the walls. The sprightly coursers bound, press forward on their bits, and shift their ground. Shields, arms, and spears flash horribly from far, and the fields glitter with a waving war. Opposed to these, come on with furious force Messapus, Chorus, and the Latian horse; these in the body placed, on either hand, sustained and closed by fair Camilla's band. Advancing in a line, they couch their spears, and less the middle space appears. Thick smoke obscures the field, and scarce are seen the neighing coursers and the shouting men. In distance of their darts, they stop their course, then man to man they rush, and horse to horse. The face of heav'n their flying jav'lins hide, and deaths unseen are dealt on either side. Tyrrhenus and Aconteus void of fear, by mettled coursers borne in full career, meet first opposed, and, with a mighty shock, their horses' heads against each other knock. Far from his steed is fierce Aconteus cast, as with an engine's force, or lightning's blast. He rolls along in blood, and breathes his last. The Latin squadrons take a sudden fright, and sling their shields behind, to save their backs in flight. Spurring at speed to their own walls they drew, close in the rear the Tuscan troops pursue, and urge their flight. Asylas leads the chase, till, seized with shame, they wheel about, and face, receive their foes, and raise a threat'ning cry. The Tuscans take their turn to fear and fly. So swelling surges, with a thund'ring roar, driven on each other's backs, insult the shore, bound o'er the rocks, encroach upon the land, and far upon the beach eject the sand. Then backwards, with a swing, they take their way, repuls'd from upper ground, and seek their mother sea; with equal hurry quit th' invaded shore, and swallow back the sand and stones they spew'd before. Twice were the Tuscans masters of the field, twice by the Latins, in their turn repell'd. Asham'd at length, to the third charge they ran, both hosts resolv'd, and mingled man to man. Now dying groans are heard, the fields are strow'd with falling bodies, and are drunk with blood. Arms, horses, men, on heaps together lie, confused the fight, and more confused the cry. Orsilochus, who durst not press too near strong Remulus, at distance drove his spear, and stuck the steel beneath his horse's ear. The fiery steed, impatient of the wound, curvets, and springing upwards with a bound, his helpless lord cast backward on the ground. Catillus pierced Iolaus first, then drew his reeking lance, and at Herminius threw, the mighty champion of the Tuscan crew. his neck and throat unarmed, his head was bare, but shaded with a length of yellow hair. Secure he fought, exposed on every part, a spacious mark for swords, and for the flying dart. Across the shoulders came the feather'd wound, transfixed he fell, and doubled to the ground. The sands with streaming blood are sanguine dyed, and death with honour sought on either side. Resistless through the war Camilla rode, in danger unappalled, and pleased with blood. One side was bare for her exerted breast, one shoulder with her painted quiver press'd. Now from afar her fatal javelins play, now with her ax's edge she hews her way. Diana's arms upon her shoulders sound, and when, too closely press'd, she quits the ground, from her bent bow she sends a backward wound. Her maids, in martial pomp on either side, Larina, Tulla, fierce Tarpeia ride. Italians all, in peace their queen's delight, in war the bold companions of the fight. So march'd the Thracian Amazons of old, when Thermodon with bloody billows roll'd. Such troops as these in shining arms were seen, when Theseus met in fight their maiden queen. Such to the field Penthesilea led, from the fierce Virgin when the Grecians fled. With such, return'd triumphant from the war, her maids with cries attend the lofty car. They clash with manly falls their moony shields, with female shouts resound the Phrygian fields. Who foremost and who last, heroic maid, on the cold earth were by thy courage laid? Thy spear of mountain ash, Eumenius first with fury driven from side to side transpierced. A purple stream came spouting from the wound, bathed in his blood he lies, and bites the ground. Liris and Pegasus at once she slew, the former as the slackened reins he drew of his faint steed, the latter as he stretched his arm to prop his friend, the javelin reached. By the same weapon, sent from the same hand, both fall together, and both spurn the sand. Amastris next is added to the slain, the rest in round she follows o'er the plain. Tereus, Harpalycus, Demophon, and Chromis at full speed her fury shun. Of all her deadly darts not one she lost, each was attended with a Trojan ghost. Young Ornithus bestrode a hunter's steed, swift for the chase, and of Apulian breed. Him from afar she spied, in arms unknown. O'er his broad back an ox's hide was thrown. His helm a wolf, whose gaping jaws were spread a covering for his cheeks, and grinned around his head. He clench'd within his hand an iron prong, and tower'd above the rest, conspicuous in the throng. Him soon she singled from the flying train, and slew with ease, then thus insults the slain: "Vain hunter, didst thou think through woods to chase the savage herd, a vile and trembling race? Here cease thy vaunts, and own my victory. A woman warrior was too strong for thee. Yet, if the ghosts demand the conqueror's name, confessing great Camilla, save thy shame." Then Butes and Orsilochus she slew, the bulkiest bodies of the Trojan crew. But Butes breast to breast, the spear descends above the gorget where his helmet ends, and o'er the shield which his left side defends. Orsilochus and she their courses ply, he seems to follow, and she seems to fly. But in a narrow ring she makes the race, and then he flies, and she pursues the chase. Gathering at length on her deluded foe, she swings her axe, and rises to the blow, full on the helm behind, with such a sway the weapon falls, the riven steel gives way. He groans, he roars, he sues in vain for grace. Brains, mingled with his blood, besmear his face. Astonish'd Aunus just arrives by chance to see his fall, nor farther dares advance, but, fixing on the horrid maid his eye, he stares, and shakes, and finds it vain to fly. Yet, like a true Ligurian, born to cheat, at least while fortune favour'd his deceit, cries out aloud: "What courage have you shown, who trust your courser's strength and not your own? Forego the vantage of your horse, alight, and then on equal terms begin the fight. It shall be seen, weak woman, what you can, when foot to foot you combat with a man." He said. She glows with anger and disdain, dismounts with speed to dare him on the plain, and leaves her horse at large among her train. With her drawn sword defies him to the field, and, marching, lifts aloft her maiden shield. The youth, who thought his cunning did succeed, reins round his horse, and urges all his speed, adds the remembrance of the spur, and hides the goring rowels in his bleeding sides. "Vain fool and coward!" cries the lofty maid, "caught in the train which thou thyself hast laid! On others practise thy Ligurian arts; thin stratagems and tricks of little hearts are lost on me, nor shalt thou safe retire, with vaunting lies, to thy fallacious sire." At this, so fast her flying feet she sped, that soon she strained beyond his horse's head; then, turning short, at once she seized the rein, and laid the boaster grovelling on the plain. Not with more ease the falcon, from above, trusses in middle air the trembling dove, then plumes the prey, in her strong pounces bound; the feathers, foul with blood, come tumbling to the ground. Now mighty Jove, from his superior height, with his broad eye surveys th' unequal fight. He fires the breast of Tarchon with disdain, and sends him to redeem th' abandon'd plain. Betwixt the broken ranks the Tuscan rides, and these encourages, and those he chides; recalls each leader, by his name, from flight; renews their ardour, and restores the fight. What panic fear has seiz'd your souls? O shame! O brand perpetual of th' Etrurian name! Cowards incurable, a woman's hand drives, breaks, and scatters your ignoble band. Now cast away the sword, and quit the shield. What use of weapons which you dare not wield? Not thus you fly your female foes by night, nor shun the feast, when the full bowels invite; when to fat off'rings the glad augur calls, and the shrill hornpipe sounds to bacchanals. These are your studied cares, your lewd delight, swift to debauch, but slow to manly fight. Thus having said, he spurs amid the foes, not managing the life he meant to lose. The first he found, he seized with headlong haste in his strong gripe, and clasped around the waist. 'Twas Venulus, whom from his horse he tore, and laid athwart his own in triumph bore. Loud shouts ensue, the Latins turn their eyes, and view th' unusual sight with vast surprise. The fiery Tarchon, flying o'er the plains, press'd in his arms, the pond'rous prey sustains; then, with his shorten'd spear, explores around his jointed arms, to fix a deadly wound. Nor less the captive struggles for his life; he writhes his body to prolong the strife, and, fencing for his naked throat, exerts his utmost vigour, and the point averts. So stoops the yellow eagle from on high, and bears a speckled serpent through the sky. Fastening his crooked talons on the prey, the prisoner hisses through the liquid way, resists the royal hawk, and, though oppress'd, she fights in volumes, and erects her crest. Turn'd to her foe, she stiffens every scale, and shoots her forky tongue, and whisks her threat'ning tail. Against the victor all defence is weak. Th' imperial bird still plies her with his beak; he tears her bowels, and her breast he gores, then claps his pinions, and securely soars. Thus, through the midst of circling enemies, strong Tarchon snatch'd and bore away his prize. The Tyrrhene troops, that shrunk before, now press the Latins, and presume the like success. Then Aruns, doom'd to death, his arms essay'd To murder unespied the Volscian maid. This way and that his winding course he bends, and, wheresoe'er she turns, her steps attends. When she retires victorious from the chase, he wheels about with care, and shifts his place. When, rushing on, she seeks her foe's flight, he keeps aloof, but keeps her still in sight. He threats, and trembles, trying every way, unseen to kill, and safely to betray. Chloreus, the priest of Cybele, from far, glitt'ring in Phrygian arms amidst the war, was by the virgin view'd. The steed he press'd was proud with trappings, and his brawny chest with scales of gilded brass was cover'd o'er. A robe of Tyrian dye the rider wore. With deadly wounds he gall'd the distant foe. Gnossian his shafts, and Lycian was his bow. A golden helm his front and head surrounds, a gilded quiver from his shoulder sounds. Gold, weav'd with linen, on his thighs he wore, with flowers of needlework distinguish'd o'er. with golden buckles bound, and gathered up before. Him the fierce maid beheld with ardent eyes, fond and ambitious of so rich a prize, or that the temple might his trophies hold, or else to shine herself in Trojan gold. Blind in her haste, she chases him alone, and seeks his life, regardless of her own. This lucky moment the sly traitor chose, then, starting from his ambush, up he rose, and threw, but first to heav'n address'd his vows. O patron of Socrates' high abodes, Phoebus, the ruling pow'r among the gods, whom first we serve, whole woods of unctuous pine are fell'd for thee, and to thy glory shine. By thee protected with our naked souls, through flames unsinged we march, and tread the kindled coals. Give me propitious pow'r, to wash away the stains of this dishonourable day. Nor spoils, nor triumph from the fact I claim, but with my future actions trust my fame. Let me by stealth this female plague o'ercome, and from the field return inglorious home. Apollo heard, and granting half his pray'r, shovell'd in winds the rest, and toss'd in empty air. He gives the death desir'd; his safe return by southern tempests to the seas is borne. Now when the jav'lin whizz'd along the skies, both armies on Camilla turn'd their eyes, directed by the sound. Of either host, the unhappy virgin, though concern'd the most, was only deaf. So greedy was she bent on golden spoils, and on her prey intent, till in her pap the winged weapon stood, infix'd, and deeply drunk the purple blood. Her sad attendants hasten'd to sustain their dying lady, drooping on the plain. Far from their sight the trembling Aruns flies, with beating heart, and fear confused with joys. Nor dares he farther to pursue his blow, or ev'n to bear the sight of his expiring foe. As, when the wolf has torn a bullock's hide at unawares, or wrench'd a shepherd's side, conscious of his audacious deed, he flies, and claps his quivering tail between his thighs. So, speeding once, the wretch no more attends, but, spurring forward, hurries among his friends. She wrench'd the jav'lin with her dying hands, but wedged within her breast the weapon stands. The wood she draws, the steely point remains. She staggers in her seat with agonizing pains. A gathering mist o'erclouds her cheerful eyes, and from her cheeks the rosy colour flies. Then turns to her, whom of her female train she trusted most, and thus she speaks with pain. "Acca, 'tis past, he swims before my sight, inexorable death, and claims his right. Bear my last words to Turnus, fly with speed, and bid him timely to my charge succeed. Repel the Trojans, and the town relieve. Farewell, and in this kiss my parting breath receive." She said, and, sliding, sunk upon the plain. Dying, her open'd hand forsakes the rein, short and more short she pants. By slow degrees, her mind the passage from her body frees. She drops her sword, she nods her plumy crest, her drooping head declining on her breast. In the last sigh her struggling soul expires, and, murmuring with disdain, to Stygian sounds retires. A shout, that struck the golden stars, ensued. Despair and rage the languish'd fight renew'd. The Trojan troops and Tuscans in a line advance to charge, the mix'd Arcadians join. But Cynthia's maid, high seated, from afar surveys the field, and fortune of the war, unmov'd awhile, till prostrate on the plain, welt'ring in blood, she sees Camilla slain, and, round her corpse, of friends and foes a fighting train. Then from the bottom of her breast she drew a mournful sigh, and these sad words ensue: "Too dear a fine, ah, much lamented maid, for warring with the Trojans thou hast paid. Nor aught avail'd, in this unhappy strife, Diana's sacred arms, to save thy life. Yet, unreveng'd, thy goddess will not leave her vot'ry's death, nor, with vain sorrow grieve. Branded the wretch, and be his name abhorr'd, but after ages shall thy praise record. The inglorious coward soon shall press the plain, Thus vows thy queen, and thus the fates ordain. High o'er the field there stood a hilly mound, sacred the place, and spread with oaks around, where, in a marble tomb, Dardanus lay, a king that once in Latium bore the sway. The beauteous Opis thither bent her flight, to mark the traitor errants from the height. Him in refulgent arms she soon espied, swoln with success, and loudly thus she cried: "Thy backward steps, vain boaster, are too late. Turn like a man, at length, and meet thy fate. Charg'd with my message to Camilla go, and say I sent thee to the shades below, an honour undeserv'd from Cynthia's bow." She said, and from her quiver chose with speed the winged shaft predestined for the deed. Then to the stubborn yew her strength applied, till the far distant horns approach'd on either side. The bowstring touch'd her breast, so strong she drew, whizzing in air the fatal arrow flew. At once the twanging bow and sounding dart the traitor heard, and felt the point within his heart. Him beating with his heels in pangs of death, his flying friends to foreign fields bequeath. The conqu'ring damsel with expanded wings the welcome message to her mistress brings. Their leader lost, the Volscians quit the field, and, unsustained, the chiefs of Turnus yield. The frighted soldiers, when their captains fly, more on their speed than on their strength rely. Confused in flight, they bear each other down, and spur their horses headlong to the town. Driven by their foes, and to their fears resign'd, not once they turn, but take their wounds behind. These drop the shield, and those the lance forego, or on their shoulders bear the slacken'd bow. The hoofs of horses, with a rattling sound, beat short and thick, and shake the rotten ground. Black clouds of dust come rolling in the sky, and o'er the darken'd walls and rampires fly. The trembling matrons, from their lofty stands, rend heav'n with female shrieks, and wring their hands. All pressing on, pursuers and pursued, are crush'd in crowds, a mingled multitude. Some happy few escape; the throng too late rush on for entrance, till they choke the gate. Ev'n in sight of home the wretched sire looks on, and sees his helpless son expire. Then, in affright, the folding gates they close, but leave their friends excluded with their foes. The vanquish'd cry, the victors loudly shout, "'Tis terror all within, and slaughter all without." Blind in their fear, they bounce against the wall, or, to the moats pursued, precipitate their fall. The Latian virgins, valiant with despair, arm'd on the tow'rs, the common danger share. So much of zeal their country's cause inspir'd, so much Camilla's great example fir'd. Poles, sharpen'd in the flames, from high they throw, with imitated darts, to gall the foe. Their lives for godlike freedom they bequeath, and crowd each other to be first in death. Meantime to Turnus, ambush'd in the shade, with heavy tidings came th' unhappy maid. The Volscians overthrown, Camilla kill'd, the foes, entirely masters of the field, like a resistless flood, come rolling on. The cry goes off the plain, and thickens to the town. Inflam'd with rage, for so the Furies fire the Daunian's breast, and so the fates require, he leaves the hilly pass, the woods in vain possess'd, and downward issues on the plain. Scarce was he gone, when to the straits, now freed from secret foes, the Trojan troops succeed. Through the black forest and the ferny brake, unknowingly secure, their way they take. From the rough mountains to the plain descend, and there, in order drawn, their line extend. Both armies now in open fields are seen, nor far the distance of the space between. Both to the city bend. Aeneas sees, through smoking fields, his hast'ning enemies, and Turnus views the Trojans in array, and hears th' approaching horses proudly neigh. Soon had their hosts in bloody battle join'd, but westward to the sea the sun declin'd. Entrench'd before the town both armies lie, while night, with sable wings, involves the sky. End of Book 11.
Book 12, Part 1 of the Aeneid by Virgil. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by David Lipa, San Francisco, California. The Aeneid by Virgil. Translated by John Dryden. Book 12, The Fortunes of War. Part 1. When Turnus saw the Latins leave the field, their armies broken and their courage quelled, himself become a mark of public spite, his honour questioned for the promised fight, the more he was with vulgar hate oppressed, the more his fury boiled within his breast. He roused his vigour for the last debate, and raised his haughty soul to meet his fate. As when the swains the Libyan lion chase, he makes a sour retreat, nor mends his pace. But if the pointed javelin pierce his side, the lordly beast returns with double pride. He wrenches out the steel, he roars for pain, his sides he lashes and erects his mane. So Turnus fares, his eyeballs flash with fire, thro' his wide nostrils clouds of smoke expire. Trembling with rage, around the court he ran, at length approach'd the king, and thus began. No more excuses or delays, I stand in arms prepared to combat hand to hand this base deserter of his native land. The Trojan by his word is bound to take the same conditions which himself did make. Renew the truce, the solemn rites prepare, and to my single virtue trust the war. The Latians unconcerned shall see the fight, this arm unaided shall assert your right. Then, if my prostrate body press the plain, to him the crown and beauteous bride remain. To whom the king sedately thus replied, Brave youth, the more your valour has been tried, the more becomes it us, with due respect, to weigh the chance of war which you neglect. You want not wealth, or a successive throne, or cities which your arms have made your own. My towns and treasures are at your command, and stored with blooming beauties is my land. Laurentum more than one Lavinia sees, unmarried, fair, of noble families. Now let me speak, and you with patience hear, things which perhaps make great a lover's ear, but sound advice, proceeding from a heart sincerely yours, and free from fraudful art. The gods, by signs, have manifestly shown, no prince Italian born should heir my throne. Oft have our augurs in prediction skilled, and oft our priests, foreign son revealed. Yet, won by worth that cannot be withstood, bribed by my kindness to my kindred blood, urged by my wife, who would not be denied, I promised my Lavinia for your bride. Her from her plighted lord by force I took, all ties of treaties and of honour broke. On your account I waged an impious war, with what success 'tis needless to declare. I and my subjects feel, and you have had your share. Twice vanquished, while in bloody fields we strive, scarce in our walls we keep our hopes alive. The rolling flood runs warm with human gore. The bones of Latians blanch the neighbouring shore. Why put I not an end to this debate, still unresolved and still a slave to fate? If Turnus' death a lasting peace can give, why should I not procure it whilst you live? Should I to doubtful arms your youth betray? What would my kinsmen, the Rutulians, say? And should you fall in flight, which heaven defend, how curse the cause which hastened to his end, the daughter's lover and the father's friend? Weigh in your mind the various chance of war, pity your parent's age, and ease his care. Such balmy words he poured, but all in vain. The proffered medicine but provoked the pain. The wrathful youth, disdaining the relief, with intermitting sobs thus vents his grief. The care, O best of fathers, which you take for my concerns, at my desire forsake. Permit me not to languish out my days, but make the best exchange of life for praise. This arm, this lance, can well dispute the prize, and the blood follows where the weapon flies. His goddess mother is not near to shroud the flying coward with an empty cloud. But now the queen, who feared for Turnus' life, and loathed the hard conditions of the strife, held him by force, and dying in his death, in these sad accents gave her sorrow breath. O Turnus, I adjure thee by these tears, and whatever price Amata's honour bears, within thy breast, since thou art all my hope, my sickly mind's repose, my sinking age's prop, since on the safety of thy life alone depends Latinus and the Latian throne. Refuse me not this one, this only prayer, to waive the combat and pursue the war. Whatever chance attends this fatal strife, think it includes in thine Amata's life. I cannot live a slave, or see my throne usurped by strangers or a Trojan son." At this a flood of tears Lavinia shed, a crimson blush her beauteous face o'erspread, varying her cheeks by turns with white and red. The driving colours, never at a stay, run here and there, and flush and fade away. Delightful change! Thus Indian ivory shows, which the bordering paint of purple glows, or lilies damask'd by the neighbouring rose. The lover gazed, and burning with desire, the more he looked, the more he fed the fire. Revenge, and jealous rage, and secret spite roll'd in his breast, and rous'd him to the fight. Then fixing on the queen his ardent eyes, firm to his first intent, he thus replies: "O mother, do not by your tears prepare Such boding omens, and prejudge the war. Resolv'd on fight, I am no longer free To shun my death, if Heav'n my death decree." Then turning to the herald, thus pursues: "Go greet the Trojan with ungrateful news. Denounce from me, that when tomorrow's light Shall gild the heavens, he need not urge the fight. The Trojan and Rutulian troops no more Shall dye with mutual blood the Latian shore. Our single swords the quarrel shall decide, And to the victor be the beauteous bride." He said, and striding on with speedy pace, He sought his coursers of the Thracian race. At his approach they toss'd their heads on high, And proudly neighing promis'd victory. The sires of these Orythia sent from far, To grace Pilumnus when he went to war. The drifts of Thracian snows were scarce so white, Nor northern winds in fleetness match'd their flight. Officious grooms stand ready by his side, And some with combs their flowing manes divide, And others stroke their chests, and gently soothe their pride. He sheath'd his limbs in arms, a temper'd mass Of golden metal those, and mountain brass. Then to his head his glitt'ring helm he tied, And girt his faithful falchion to his side. In his Aetnaean forge the god of fire That falchion labour'd to the hero's sire. Immortal keenness on the blade bestow'd, And plunged it hissing in the Stygian flood. Propp'd on a pillar, which the ceiling bore, Was placed the lance a Runcan actor wore, Which with such force he brandish'd in his hand, The tough ash trembled like an osier wand. Then cried: "O ponderous spoil of actors slain, And never yet by Turnus toss'd in vain, Fail not this day thy wonted force, but go, Sent by this hand to fierce the Trojan foe. Give me to tear his corslet from his breast, And from that eunuch head to rend the crest, Dragg'd in the dust his frizzled hair to soil, Hot from the vexing iron, and smear'd with fragrant oil." Thus while he raves, from his wide nostrils flies A fiery steam, and sparkles from his eyes. So fair as the bull his lov'd female's sight, Proudly he bellows, and preludes the fight. He tries his goring horns against a tree, And meditates his absent enemy. He pushes at the winds, he digs the strand With his black hoofs, and spurns the yellow sand. Nor less the Trojan in his Lemnian arms To future fight his manly courage warms. He whets his fury, and with joy prepares To terminate at once the ling'ring war. To cheer his chiefs and tender son relates What Heav'n had promised, and expounds the fates. Then to the Latian king he sends, to cease The rage of arms, and ratify the peace. The morn ensuing, from the mountain's height, Had scarcely spread the skies with rosy light. The ethereal coursers, bounding from the sea, From out their flaming nostrils breathed the day. When now the Trojan and Rutulian guard In friendly labour join'd, the list prepar'd. Beneath the walls they measure out the space, Then sacred altars rear on sods of grass, Where with religious their common gods they place. In purest white the priests their heads attire, And living waters bear, and holy fire. And o'er their linen hoods and shaded hair long twisted wreaths of sacred Varian wear. In order, issuing from the town appears the Latin legion, arm'd with pointed spears, and from the fields, advancing on a line, the Trojan and the Tuscan forces join. Their various arms afford a pleasing sight. A peaceful train they seem, in peace prepar'd for fight. Betwixt the ranks the proud commanders ride, glittering with gold, and vests in purple dyed. Here Mnestheus, author of the Memmian line, and there Messapus, born of seed divine. The sign is given, and round the listed space each man in order fills his proper place. Reclining on their ample shields they stand, and fix their pointed lances in the sand. Now studious of the sight, a numerous throng of either sex, promiscuous, old and young, swarm the town. By those who rest behind, the gates and walls and houses topp'd are lined. Meantime the Queen of Heav'n beheld the sight, with eyes unpleased from Mount Albano's height, since called Albano by succeeding fame, but then an empty hill without a name. She thence survey'd the field, the Trojan powers, the Latian squadrons, and Laurentine towers. Then thus the goddess of the skies bespoke, with sighs and tears, the goddess of the lake, King Turnus' sister, once a lovely maid, ere to the lust of lawless Jove betray'd, compress'd by force, but by the grateful god, now made the Naias of the neighb'ring flood. "O nymph, the pride of living lakes," said she, "O most renown'd and most belov'd by me, long hast thou known, nor need I to record the wanton sallies of my wandering lord, of every Latian fair whom Jove misled to mount by stealth my violated bed. To thee alone I grudged not his embrace, but gave a part of heav'n and an unenvied place. Now learn from me thy near approaching grief, nor think my wishes want to thy relief, while fortune favour'd, nor heav'n's king denied to lend my succour to the Latian side. I saved thy brother, and the sinking state, but now he struggles with unequal fate, and goes, with gods averse, o'ermatch'd in might, to meet inevitable death in fight. Nor must I break the truce, nor can sustain the sight. Thou, if thou dar'st thy present aid supply, it well becomes a sister's care to try." At this the lovely nymph, with grief oppress'd, thrice tore her hair and beat her comely breast. To whom Saturnia thus: "Thy tears are late, haste, snatch him, if he can be snatch'd from fate. New tumults kindle, violate the truce. Who knows what changeful fortune may produce? 'Tis not a crime t' attempt what I decree, or if it were, discharge the crime on me," she said, and sailing on the winged wind, left the sad nymph suspended in her mind. And now pomp the peaceful kings appear. 4 steeds the chariot of the Latinus bears, 12 golden beams around his temple play, to mark his lineage from the god of day. 2 snowy coursers Turnus' chariot yoke, and in his hand 2 massy spears he shook. Then issued from the camp, in arms divine, Aeneas, author of the Roman line, and by his side Ascanius took his place, the second hope of Rome's immortal race. Adorn'd in white, a reverend priest appears, and offerings to the flaming altars bears, a porket, and a lamb that never suffer'd shears. Then to the rising sun he turns his eyes, and strews the beasts, design'd for sacrifice, with salt and meal. With like officious care he marks their foreheads, and he clips their hair. Betwixt their horns the purple wine he sheds, with the same gen'rous juice the flame he feeds. Aeneas then unsheath'd his shining sword, and thus with pious prayers the gods ador'd: "All-seeing sun, and thou, Ausonian soil, for which I have sustained so long a toil, thou, King of Heav'n, and thou, the Queen of Air, propitious now, and reconciled by prayer, thou, God of war, whose unresisted sway the labours and events of arms obey, ye living fountains, and ye running floods, all powers of ocean, all ethereal gods, hear and bear record. If I fall in field, or, recreant in the fight, to Turnus yield, my Trojans shall increase Evander's town, Ascanius shall renounce th' Estonian crown. All claims, all questions of debate shall cease, nor he nor they with force infringe the peace. But if my juster arms prevail in fight, as sure they shall, for if I divine aright, my Trojans shall not o'er the Italians reign; both equal, both unconquer'd shall remain, join'd in their laws, their lands, and their abodes. I ask but altars for my weary gods. The care of those religious rites be mine. The crown to King Latinus I resign. His be the sov'reign sway, nor will I share his pow'r in peace, or his command in war. For me, my friends, another town shall frame, and bless the rising tow'rs with fair Lavinia's name. Thus he. Then, with erected eyes and hands, the Latian king before his altar stands. By the same heaven, said he, and earth, and main, and all the pow'rs that all three contain, by hell below, and by that upper god, whose thunder signs the peace, who seals it with his nod, so let Latona's double offspring hear, and double-fronted Janus what I swear. I touch the sacred altars, touch the flames, and all those pow'rs attest, and all their names. Whatever chance befall on either side, no term of time this union shall divide. No force, no fortune shall my vows unbind, or shake the steadfast tenor of my mind. Not though the circling seas should break their bound, o'erflow the shores, or sap the solid ground; not though the lamps of heav'n their spheres forsake, hurl'd down and hissing in the nether lake, even as this royal scepter (for he bore a scepter of his hand) shall never more shoot out in branches, or renew the birth, an orphan now, cut from the mother earth by the keen axe, dishonour'd of its hair, and cased in brass for Latian kings to bear. When thus in public view the peace was tied, with solemn vows and sworn on either side, all dues perform'd which holy rites require, the victim beasts are slain before the fire, the trembling entrails from their bodies torn, and to the fatten'd flames in chargers borne. Already the Rutulians deem their man o'ermatch'd in arms, before the fight began. First rising fears are whisper'd through the crowd, then gathering sound they murmur more aloud. Now side to side they measure with their eyes the champion's bulk, their sinews, and their size. The nearer they approach, the more is known the apparent disadvantage of their own. Turnus himself appears in public sight, conscious of his fate, desponding of the fight. Slowly he moves, and at his altar stands, with eyes dejected and with trembling hands. And while he mutters undistinguish'd prayers, a livid deadness in his cheeks appears. With anxious pleasure, when Juturna view'd the increasing fright of the mad multitude, when their short sighs and thickening sobs she heard, and found their ready minds for change prepar'd, dissembling her immortal form she took Camertus mien, his habit and his look. A chief of ancient blood, in arms well known, was his great sire, and he his greater son. His shape assum'd, amid the ranks she ran, and humouring their first motions, thus began: "For shame, Rutulians! Can you bear the sight of one exposed for all, in single fight? Can we, before the face of heav'n, confess our courage colder, our numbers less? View all the Trojan host, the Arcadian band, and Tuscan army, count them as they stand. Undaunted to the battle if we go, scarce every second man will share a foe. Turnus, 'tis true, in this unequal strife, shall lose with honour his devoted life, or change it rather for immortal fame, succeeding to the gods from whence he came. But you, a servile and inglorious band, for foreign lords shall sow your native land, those fruitful fields your fighting fathers gain'd, which have so long their lazy sons sustained." With words like these she carried her design. A rising murmur runs across the line. Then even the city troops and Latians, tir'd with tedious war, seem with new souls inspir'd. Their champion's fate with pity they lament, and of the league so lately sworn repent. Nor fails the goddess to foment the rage with lying wonders and a false presage, but adds a sign, which present to their eyes inspires new courage and a glad surprise. For sudden, in the fiery tracts above, appears in pomp the imperial bird of Jove. A plump of fowl he spies that swims the lakes, and o'er their head his sounding pinions shakes. Then stooping on the fairest of the train, in his strong talons trusts a silver swan. The Italians wonder at the unusual sight, but while he lags and labours in his flight, behold the dastard fowl return anew, and with united force the foe pursue. Clamorous around the royal hawk they fly, and thickening in a cloud o'ershade the sky. They cuff, they scratch, they cross his airy course, nor can the encumber'd bird sustain their force, but vex'd, not vanquish'd, drops the pond'rous prey, and lighten'd of his burthen wings his way. The Ausonian bands with shouts salute the sight, eager of action, and demand the fight. Then King Tolumnius, vers'd in augurs' arts, cries out, and thus his boasted skill imparts: "At length 'tis granted, what I long desir'd. This is what my frequent vows requir'd. Ye gods, I take your omen, and obey. Advance, my friends, and charge! I lead the way." These are the foreign foes, whose impious band, like that rapacious bird, infests our land. But soon, like him, they shall be forced to the sea, by strength united, and forego the prey. Your timely succor to your country bring, haste to the rescue, and redeem your king. He said, and, pressing onward through the crew, pois'd his lifted arm, and his lance he threw. The winged weapon, whistling in the wind, came driving on, nor miss'd the mark design'd. At once the cornel rattled in the skies, at once tumultuous shouts and clamors rise. 9 brothers in a goodly band there stood, born of Arcadian mix'd with Tuscan blood. Gylippus' sons the fatal jav'lin threw, aim'd at the midmost of the friendly crew. A passage through the jointed arms it found, just where the belt was to the body bound, and struck the gentle youth extended on the ground. Then, fir'd with pious rage, the gen'rous train run madly forward to revenge the slain. And some, with eager haste, their jav'lins throw, and some, with sword in hand, assault the foe. The wish'd insult the Latin troops embrace, and meet their ardor in the middle space. The Trojans, Tuscans, and Arcadian line, with equal courage obviate their design. Peace leaves the violated fields, and hate both armies urges to their mutual fate. With impious haste their altars are o'erturn'd, the sacrifice half broil'd and half unburn'd. Thick storms of steel from either army fly, and clouds of clashing darts obscure the sky. Brands from the fire are missive weapons made, with chargers, bowls, and all the priestly trade. Latinus, frightened, hastens from the fray, and bears his unregarded gods away. These on horses vault, those yoke the car, the rest with swords on high run headlong to the war. Messapus, eager to confound the peace, spurr'd his hot courser through the fighting priests. At King Alestes by his purple known, at Tuscan prince, and by his regal crown, and, with a shock encountering, bore him down. Backwards he fell, and, as his fate design'd, the ruins of an altar were behind. There, pitching on his shoulders and his head, amid the scatt'ring fires he lay supinely spread. The beamy spear, descending from above, his cuirass pierced, and through his body drove. Then, with a scornful smile, the victor cries, "The gods have found a fitter sacrifice." Greedy of the spoils, the Italians strip the dead of his rich armor, and uncrown his head. Priest Corianus arm'd his better hand from his own altar with a blazing brand, and, as Abusus with a thund'ring pace advanced to battle, dash'd it on his face. His bristly beard shines out with sudden fires, the crackling crop a noisome scent expires. Following the blow, he seized his curling crown with his left hand, his other cast him down. The prostrate body with his knees he press'd, and plung'd his holy poniard in his breast. while Podalirius with his sword pursued the shepherd Alsus through the flying crowd. Swiftly he turns, and aims a deadly blow full on the front of his unwary foe. The broad axe enters with a crashing sound, and cleaves the chin with one continued wound. Warm blood and mingled brains besmear his arms around. An iron sleep his stupid eyes oppress'd, and seal'd their heavy lids in endless rest. But good Aeneas rush'd amidst the bands. Bare was his head, and naked were his hands, in sign of truce. Then thus he cried aloud: "What sudden rage, what new desire of blood, inflames your alter'd minds? O Trojans, cease from impious arms, nor violate the peace. By human sanctions, and by laws divine, the terms are all agreed, the war is mine. Dismiss your fears, and let the fight ensue. This hand alone shall right the gods and you. Our injur'd altars and their broken vow, to this avenging sword the faithless Turnus owe." Thus while he spoke, unmindful of defence, a winged arrow struck the pious prince. But whether from some human hand it came, or hostile god, is left unknown by fame. No human hand or hostile god was found, to boast the triumph of so base a wound. When Turnus saw the Trojan quit the plain, his chiefs dismay'd, his troops a fainting train, the unhoped event his heightened soul inspires. At once his arms and coursers he requires. Then with a leap his lofty chariot gains, and with a ready hand assumes the reins. He drives impetuous, and wherever he goes, he leaves behind a lane of slaughter'd foes. These his lance reaches, over those he rolls his rapid car, and crushes out their souls. In vain the vanquish'd fly, the victor sends the dead men's weapons at their living friends. Thus on the banks of Hebrus' freezing flood, the god of battles, in his angry mood, clashing his sword against his brazen shield, let loose the reins, and scours along the field. Before the wind his fiery coursers fly, groans the sad earth, resounds the rattling sky. Wrath, terror, treason, tumult, and despair, dire faces and deform'd, surround the car. Friends of the god and followers of the war, with fury not unlike, nor less disdain, exulting Turnus flies along the plain. His smoking horses at their utmost speed he lashes on, and urges over the dead. Their fetlocks run with blood, and when they bound, the gore and gathering dust are dash'd around. Thamyris and Pholus, masters of the war, he kill'd at hand, but Sthenelus afar. From far the sons of Imbracus he slew, Glaucus and Lades of the Lycian crew. Both taught to fight on foot, in battle join'd, or mount the courser that outstrips the wind. Meantime Eumedes, vaunting in the field, new fir'd the Trojans, and their foes repell'd. The son of Dolon bore his grandsire's name, but emulated more his father's name. His guileful father sent a nightly spy the Grecian camp, in order to descry hard enterprise, and well he might require Achilles' car and horses for his hire. But met upon the scout th' Aetolian prince, in death bestow'd a juster recompense. Fierce Turnus view'd the Trojan from afar, and launch'd his javelin from his lofty car. Then, lightly leaping down, pursued the blow, and pressing with his foot his prostrate foe, wrench'd from his feeble hold the shining sword, and plung'd it in the bosom of its lord. "Possess," said he, "the fruit of all thy pains, and measure at thy length our Latian plains. Thus are my foes rewarded by my hand, thus may they build their town, and thus enjoy the land." Then Dares Butes Sybaris he slew, whom o'er his neck his flound'ring courser threw. As when loud Boreas with his blust'ring train stoops from above, incumbent on the main. Wherever he flies, he drives the wrack before, and rolls the billows on the Aegean shore. So, where resistless Turnus takes his course, the scatter'd squadrons bend before his force. His crest of horses' hair is blown behind by adverse air, and rustles in the wind. This haughty Phegeus saw with high disdain, and as the chariot roll'd along the plain, light from the ground he leapt, and seiz'd the rein. Thus hung in air, he still retain'd his hold, the coursers frighted, and their course controll'd. The lance of Turnus reach'd him as he hung, and pierc'd his plated arms, but pass'd along, and only razed the skin. He turn'd, and held against his threat'ning foe his ample shield, then call'd for aid. But, while he cried in vain, the chariot bore him backward on the plain. He lies revers'd, the victor king descends, and strikes so justly where his helmet ends, he lops his head. The Latian fields are drunk with streams that issue from the bleeding trunk. While he triumphs, and while the Trojans yield, the wounded prince is forced to leave the field. Strong Mnestheus and Achates often tried, and young Ascanius, weeping by his side, conduct him to his tent. Scarce can he rear his limbs from the earth, supported on his spear. Resolv'd in mind, regardless of the smart, he tugs with both his hands, and breaks the dart. The steel remains. No readier way he found to draw the weapon, than to enlarge the wound. Eager of fight, impatient of delay, he begs, and his unwilling friends obey. Iapis was at hand to prove his art, whose blooming youth so fir'd Apollo's heart, that for his love he proffer'd to bestow his tuneful harp and his unerring bow. The pious youth, more studious how to save his aged sire, now sinking to the grave, preferr'd the powers of plants, and silent praise of healing art, before Phoeban bays. Propp'd on his lance, the pensive hero stood, and heard and saw, unmov'd, the mourning crowd. The fam'd physician tuck'd his robes around with ready hands, and hastens to the wound. With gentle touches he performs his part, this way and that, soliciting the dart, and exercises all his heav'nly art. All soft'ning simples, known of sov'reign use, he presses out, and pours their noble juice. There first infus'd, to lenify the pain, he tugs with pincers, but he tugs in vain. Then to the patron of his art he pray'd, the patron of his art refus'd his aid. Meantime the war approaches to the tents, the alarm grows hotter, and the noise augments. The driving dust proclaims the danger near, and first their friends, and then their foes appear. Their friends retreat, their foes pursue the rear. The camp is fill'd with terror and affright, the hissing shafts within the trench alight. An undistinguish'd noise ascends the sky, the shouts those who kill, and the groans of those who die. But now the goddess mother, mov'd with grief, and pierc'd with pity, hastens her relief. A branch of healing dittany she brought, which in the Cretan fields with care she sought. Rough is the stern which woolly leaves surround, the leaves with flowers, the flowers with purple crown'd. Well known to wounded goats, a sure relief, to draw the pointed steel and ease the grief. This Venus brings, in clouds involv'd, and brews the extracted liquor with ambrosian dews, and odorous panacee. Unseen she stands, tempering the mixture with her heav'nly hands, and pours it in a bowl, already crown'd with juice of medicinal herbs prepar'd to bathe the wound. The leech, unknowing of superior art, which aids the cure, with this foments the part, and in a moment ceas'd the raging smart. Stanch'd is the blood, and in the bottom stands the steel, but scarcely touch'd with tender hands, moves up, and follows of its own accord, and health and vigor are at once restor'd. Iapis first perceiv'd the closing wound, and first the footsteps of a god he found. "Arms! arms!" he cries, "the sword and shield prepare, and send the willing chief renew'd to war. This is no mortal work, no cure of mine, nor art's effect, but done by hands divine. Some god our gen'ral to the battle sends, some god preserv'd his life for greater ends." The hero arms in haste, his hands infold his thighs with cuishes of refulgent gold. Inflam'd to the fight, and rushing to the field, that hand sustaining the celestial shield, this grips the lance, and with such vigor shakes, that to the rest the beamy weapon quakes. Then with a close embrace he strain'd his son, and kissing through his helmet thus began: "My son, from my example learn the war, in camps to suffer, and in fields to dare. But happier chance than mine attends thy care. This day my hand thy tender age shall shield, and crowns with honour of the conquer'd field. Thou, when thy riper years send thee forth to toils of war, be mindful of my worth. Assert thy birthright, and in arms be known for Hector's nephew and Aeneas' son," he said, and striding issued on the plain. Antaeus and Mnestheus and a num'rous train attend his steps; the rest their weapons take, and crowding to the field, their camps forsake. A cloud of blinding dust is raised around, labours beneath their feet the trembling ground. Now Turnus, posted on a hill, from far beheld the progress of the moving war. With him the Latins view'd the cover'd plains, and the chill blood ran backwards in their veins. Juturna saw the advancing troops appear, and heard the hostile sound, and fled for fear. Aeneas leads, and draws a sweeping train, clos'd in their ranks, and pouring on the plain, as when a whirlwind, rushing to the shore from the mid-ocean, drives the waves before. The painful hind with heavy heart foresees the flatted fields and slaughter of the trees. With like impetuous rage the prince appears before his doubled front, nor less destruction bears. And now both armies shock in open field. Osiris is by strong Thymbraeus kill'd. Archytas, Ufens, Epulon are slain, all fam'd in arms, and of the Latian train, by Gyas, Mnestheus, and Achates' hand. The fatal augur falls, by whose command the truce was broken, and whose lance embrued with Trojan blood the unhappy fight renew'd. Loud shouts and clamours rend the liquid sky, and o'er the field frighted Latins fly. The prince disdains the dastards to pursue, nor moves to meet in arms the fighting few. Turnus alone amid the dusky plain he seeks, and to the combat calls in vain. Juturna heard, and seiz'd with mortal fear, forc'd from the beam her brother's charioteer, assumes his shape, his armour, and his mien, and like Metiscus in his seat is seen. End of Book 12, Part 1. Recording by David Lipa, San Francisco, California. Book 12, Part 2 of the Aeneid. The Aeneid, by Virgil. Translated by John Dryden. Book 12, The Fortunes of War, Part 2. As the black swallows near the palace plies, o'er empty courts and under arches flies, now hawks aloft, now skims along the flood, to furnish her loquacious nest with food, so drives the rapid goddess over the plains. The smoking horses run with loosen'd reins, she steers a various course among the foes, now here, now there, her conqu'ring brother shows, now with a straight, now with a wheeling flight, she turns and bends, but shuns the single fight. Aeneas, fired with fury, breaks the crowd, and seeks his foe, and calls by name aloud. He runs within a narrower ring, and tries to stop the chariot, but the chariot flies. If he but gain a glimpse, Juturna fears, and far away the Daunian hero bears. What should he do? Nor arts nor arms avail, and various cares in vain his mind assail. The great Messapus thundering through the field, in his left hand 2 pointed javelins held. Encountering on the prince, one dart he drew, and with unerring aim and utmost vigour threw. Aeneas saw it come, and stooping low, beneath his buckler shunn'd the threat'ning blow. The weapon hiss'd above his head, and tore the wavering plume which on his helm he wore. Forced by this hostile act, and fired with spite, that flying Turnus still declined the fight. The prince, whose piety had long repell'd his inborn ardour, now invades the field, invokes the powers of violated peace, their rights and injured altars to redress, then to his rage abandoning the rein, with blood and slaughter'd bodies fills the plain. What god can tell, what numbers can display the various labours of that fatal day? What chiefs and champions fell on either side, in combat slain, or by what deaths they died, whom Turnus, whom the Trojan hero kill'd, who shared the fame and fortune of the field. Jove, couldst thou view, and not avert thy sight, two jarring nations join'd in cruel fight, whom leagues of lasting love so shortly shall unite. Aeneas first Rutulian Sucro found, whose valour made the Trojans quit the ground. Betwixt his ribs the javelin drove, so just it reach'd his heart, nor needs a second thrust. Now Turnus at 2 blows 2 brethren slew. First from his horse fierce Amycus he threw, then leaping on the ground, on foot assail'd Diores, and in equal fight prevail'd. Their lifeless trunks he leaves upon the place, their heads distilling gore his chariot grace. 3 cold on earth the Trojan hero threw, whom without respite at one charge he threw. Cethegus, Tanius, Tagus fell oppressed, and sad Onythes added to the rest of Theban blood, whom Peridia bore. Turnus 2 brothers from the Lycian shore, and from Apollo's fane to battle sent, overthrew, nor Phoebus could their fate prevent. Peaceful Menothes after these he killed, who long had shunned the dangers of the field. On Lerna's lake a silent life he led, and with his nets and angle earned his bread. Nor pompous cares nor palaces he knew, but wisely from the infectious world withdrew. Poor was his house, his father's painful hand discharged his rent and plowed another's land. As flames along the lofty woods are thrown, on different sides and both by winds are blown, the laurels crackle in the sputtering fire, the frightened sylvans from their shades retire. Or as 2 neighbouring torrents fall from the sky, rapid they run, the foamy waters fry. They roll'd to the sea with unresisted force, and down the rocks precipitate their course. Not with less rage the rival heroes take their different ways, nor less destruction make. With spears afar, with swords at hand they strike, and zeal of slaughter fires their souls alike. Like them, their dauntless men maintain the field, and hearts are pierced, unknowing how to yield. They blow for blow return, and wound for wound, and heaps of bodies raze the level ground. Murranus, boasting of his blood that springs from a long royal race of Latian kings, is by the Trojan from his chariot thrown, crushed with the weight of an unwieldy stone. Betwixt the wheels he fell, the wheels that bore his living load his dying body tore. His starting steeds, to shun the glittering sword, pawed down his trampled limbs, forgetful of their lord. Fierce Hylas threatened high, and face to face affronted Turnus in the middle space. The prince encountered him in full career, and at his temples aimed the deadly spear. So fatally the flying weapon sped, that through his helmet pierced his head. Nor Arcesius could escape from Turnus' hand, in vain the strongest of the Arcadian band. Nor to Capentus could his gods afford, availing against the Aenean sword, which to his naked heart pursued the course, nor could his plated shield sustain the force. Iolaus fell, whom not the Grecian powers, nor great subverter of the Trojan towers were doomed to kill, while heaven prolonged his date. But who can pass the bounds prefixed by fate? In high Lyrnessus and in Troy he held 2 palaces, and was from each expelled. Of all the mighty man, the last remains, a little spot of foreign earth contains. And now, both hosts their broken troops unite in equal ranks, and mix in mortal fight. Seresthus and undaunted Mnestheus join the Trojan, Tuscan, and Arcadian line. Sea-born Messapus with Aeneas heads the Latin squadrons, and to battle leads. They strike, they push, they throng the scanty space, resolved on death, impatient of disgrace, and where one falls, another fills his place. The Cyprian goddess now inspires her son to leave the unfinished fight, and storm the town. For while he rolls his eyes around the plain in quest of Turnus, whom he seeks in vain, he views the unguarded city from afar, in careless quiet and secure of war. Occasion offers, and excites his mind to dare beyond the task he first designed. Resolved, he calls his chiefs, they leave the fight. Attended thus, he takes a neighb'ring height, the crowding troops about their general stand, all under arms, and wait his high command. Then thus the lofty prince: "Hear and obey, ye Trojan bands, without the least delay. Jove is with us, and what I have decreed requires our utmost vigor and our speed. Your instant arms against the town prepare, the source of mischief and the seat of war. This day the Latian towers that mate the sky shall level with the plain in ashes lie. The people shall be slaves, unless in their time they kneel for pardon and repent their crime. Twice have our foes been vanquished on the plain. Then shall I wait till Turnus will be slain? Your force against the perjured city bend. There it began, and there the war shall end. The peace profaned our rightful arms requires. Cleanse the polluted place with purging fires." He finished, and one soul inspiring all, formed in a wedge, the foot approached the wall. Without the town, an unprovided train of gaping, gazing citizens are slain. Some firebrands, others scaling ladders bear, and those they toss aloft, and these they rear. The flames now launched, the feathered arrows fly, and clouds of missive arms obscure the sky. Advancing to the front the hero stands, and stretching out to heaven his pious hands, attests the gods, asserts his innocence, upbraids with breach of faith the Ausonian prince, declares the royal honor doubly stained, and twice the rites of holy peace profaned. Dissenting clamors in the town arise, each will be heard, and all at once advise. One part for peace, one for war contends. Some would exclude their foes, and some admit their friends. The helpless king is hurried in the throng, and, whatever the tide prevails, is borne along. Thus when the swain within a hollow rock invades the bees with suffocating smoke, they run around or labor on their wings, disused to flight, and shoot their sleepy stings. To shun the bitter fumes in vain they try. Black vapors issuing from the vent involve the sky. But fate and envious fortune now prepare to plunge the Latins in the last despair. The queen, who saw the foes invade the town and brands on top of burning houses thrown, cast round her eyes, distracted with her fear. No troops of Turnus in the field appear. Once more she stares abroad, but still in vain, and then concludes the royal youth is slain. Mad with her anguish, impotent to bear the mighty grief, she loathes the vital air. She calls herself the cause of all this ill, and owns the dire effects of her ungoverned will. She raves against the gods, she beats her breast. She tears with both her hands her purple vest. Then round a beam a running noose she tied, and fastened by the neck obscenely died. Soon as the fatal news by fame was blown, and to her dames and to her daughter known, the sad Lavinia rends her yellow hair and rosy cheeks, the rest her sorrows share. With shrieks the palace rings, and madness of despair, the spreading rumor fills the public place. Confusion, fear, distraction, and disgrace, and silent shame are seen in every face. Latinus tears his garments as he goes, both for his public and his private woes. With filth his venerable beard besmears, and sordid dust deforms his silver hairs. And much he blames the softness of his mind, obnoxious to the charms of womankind, and soon seduced to change what he so well designed, to break the solemn league so long desired, nor finish what his fates and those of Troy required. Now Turnus rolls aloof o'er empty plains, and here and there some struggling foes he gleans. His flying coursers please him less and less, ashamed of easy fight and cheap success. Thus half contented, anxious in his mind, the distant cries come driving in the wind. Shouts from the walls, but shouts and murmurs drowned, a jarring mixture and a boding sound. Alas, said he, what mean these dismal cries? What doleful clamors from the town arise? Confused he stops, and backward pulls the reins. She who the driver's office now sustains replies, Neglect, my lord, these new alarms. Here fight, and urge the fortune of your arms. There want not others to defend the wall. If, by your rival's hand, the Italians fall, so shall your fatal sword his friends oppress, and honor equal in success. To this the prince, O sister, for I knew the peace infringed proceeded first from you. I knew you when you mingled first in fight, and now in vain you would deceive my sight. Why, goddess, this unprofitable care? Who sent you down from heaven, involved in air, your share of mortal sorrows to sustain, and see your brother bleeding on the plain? For to what power can Turnus have recourse, or how resist his fate's prevailing force? These eyes beheld Murranus bite the ground. Mighty the man, and mighty was the wound. I heard my dearest friend with dying breath, my name invoking to revenge his death. Brave Ufens fell, with honor on the place, to shun the shameful sight of my disgrace. On earth's supine, a manly corpse he lies, his vest and armor are the victor's prize. Then shall I see Laurentum in a flame, which only wanted to complete my shame. How will the Latins hoot their champion's flight? How Drances will insult and point them to the sight? Is death so hard to bear, ye gods below? Since those above so small compassion show, receive a soul unsullied yet with shame, which not belies my great forefather's name. He said, and while he spoke with flying speed came sages urging on his foamy steed. Fixed on his wounded face a shaft he bore, and seeking Turnus sent his voice before. Turnus, on you alone depends our last relief. Compassionate your friends. Like lightning fierce Aeneas rolling on, with arms and vests, with flames invades the town. The brands are tossed on high, the winds conspire to drive along the deluge of the fire. All eyes are fixed on you. Your foes rejoice, even the king staggers and suspends his choice. Doubts to deliver or defend the town, whom to reject or whom to call his son. The queen on whom your utmost hopes were placed, herself suborning death, has breathed her last. 'Tis true, Messapus fearless of his fate, with fierce Aeneas' aid, defends the gate. On every side surrounded by the foe, the more they kill, the greater numbers grow. An iron harvest mounts, and still remains to mow. You, far aloof from your forsaken bands, your rolling chariot drive over empty. Stupid he sate, his eyes on death declined, and various cares revolving in his mind, rage boiling from the bottom of his heart, and sorrow mixed with shame his soul oppressed, and conscious worth lay laboring in his thought, and love by jealousy to madness wrought. By slow degrees his reason drove away the mists of passion, and resumed her sway. Then rising on his car, he turned his look, and saw the town involved in fire and smoke. A wooden tower, with flames already blazed, which his own hands on beams and rafters raised, and bridges laid above to join the space, and wheels below to roll from place to place. Sister, the fates have vanquished, let us go the way which heaven and my hard fortune show. The fight is fixed, nor shall the branded name of a base coward blot your brother's fame. Death is my choice, but suffer me to try my force, and vent my rage before I die, he said, and leaping down without delay, through crowds of scattered foes he freed his way. Striding he passed, impetuous as the wind, and left the grieving goddess far behind. As when a fragment from a mountain torn by raging tempests, or by torrents borne, or sapped by time, or loosed from the roots, prone through the void the rocky ruin shoots, rolling from crag to crag, from steep to steep, down sink at once the shepherds and their sheep. Involved alike they rush to nether ground, stunned with the shock they fall, and stunned from earth rebound. So Turnus, hasting headlong into town, shouldering and shoving, bore the squadrons down. Still pressing onwards to the wall he drew. where shafts and spears and darts promiscuous flew, and sanguine streams the slippery ground embrue. First stretching out his arm in sign of peace, he cries aloud to make the combat cease. Rutulians, hold, and Latin troops retire. The fight is mine, and me the gods require. 'Tis just that I should vindicate alone the broken truce, or for the breach atone. This day shall free from wars the Ausonian state, or finish my misfortunes in my fate. Both armies from their bloody work desist, and bearing backwards form a spacious list. The Trojan hero who received from fame the welcome sound, and heard the champion's name, soon leaves the taken works and mounted walls. Greedy of war where the greater glory calls, he springs to fight, exulting in his force. His jointed armor rattles in the course. Like Eryx, or like Athos, great he shows, or Father Apennine, when, white with snows, his head divine obscure in clouds he hides, and shakes the sounding forest on his sides. The nations, overawed, surcease the fight. Immovable their bodies, fixed their sight. Even death stands still, nor from above they throw their darts, nor drive their battering rams below. In silent order either army stands, and drop their swords unknowing from their hands. The Ausonian king beholds with wondering sight two mighty champions matched in single fight, born under climes remote and brought by fate with swords to try their titles to the state. Now in closed field each other from afar they view, and rushing on begin the war. They launch their spears, then hand to hand they meet. The trembling soil resounds beneath their feet. Their bucklers clash, their blows descend from high, and flakes of fire from their hard helmets fly. Courage conspires with chance, and both engage with equal fortunes yet in mutual rage. As when two bulls for their fair female fight in Scylla's shades, or on Tabernus' height. With horns adverse they meet, the keeper flies. Mute stands the herd, their heifers roll their eyes, and wait the event which victor they shall bear, and who shall be the lord to rule the lusty year. With rage of love the jealous rivals burn, and push for push, and wound for wound return. Their dewlaps gored, their sides are laved in blood. Loud cries and roaring sounds rebellow through the wood. Such was the combat in the listed ground. So clashed their swords, and so their shields resound. Jove sets the beam. In either scale he lays the champion's fate, and each exactly weighs. On this side life and lucky chance ascends, loaded with death that other scale descends. Raised on the stretch young Turnus aims a blow, full on the helm of his unguarded foe. Shrill shouts and clamors ring on either side, as hopes and fears their panting hearts divide. But all in pieces flies the traitor's sword, and in the middle stroke deserts his lord. Now is but death or flight disarm'd he flies, when in his hand an unknown hilt he spies. Fame, says that Turnus, when his steeds he join'd hurrying to war, disorder'd in his mind, snatch'd the first weapon which his haste could find. 'Twas not the fated sword his father bore, but that his charioteer Mesticus wore. This, while the Trojans fled, the toughness held, but vain against the great Vulcanian shield. The mortal tempered steel deceived his hand, the shivered fragments shone amid the sand. Surprised with fear, he fled along the field, and now forthright, and now in orbits wheeled. For here the Trojan troops the lists surround, and there the pass is closed with pools and marshy ground. Aeneas hastens, though with heavier pace, his wound so newly knit retards the chase, and oft his trembling knees their aid refuse, yet pressing foot by foot, his foe pursues. Thus, when a fearful stag is closed around with crimson toils, or in a river found, high on the bank the deep-mouthed hound appears, still opening, following still. Wherever he steers, the persecuted creature to and fro turns here and there to 'scape his Umbrian foe. Steep is the ascent, and if he gains the land, the purple death is pitch'd along the strand. His eager foe, determined to the chase, stretch'd at his length, gains ground at every pace. Now to his balmy head he makes his way, and now he holds, or thinks he holds, his prey. Just at the pitch the stag springs out with fear. He bites the wind, and fills his sounding jaws with air. The rocks, the lakes, the meadows ring with cries. The mortal tumult mounts, and thunders in the skies. Thus flies the Daunian prince, and flying blames his tardy troops, calling by their names, demands his trusty sword. The Trojan threats the realm with ruin, and their ancient seats to lay in ashes, if they dare supply with arms or aid his vanquished enemy. Thus menacing, he still pursues the course with vigor, though diminished of his force. 10 times already the listed place one chief had fled, and the other given chase. No trivial prize is played, for on the life or death of Turnus now depends the strife. Within the space an olive tree had stood, a sacred shade, a venerable wood, for vows to Faunus paid, the Latins' guardian god. Here hung the vests, and tablets were engraved of sinking mariners from shipwreck saved. With heedless hands the Trojans felled the tree, to make the ground enclosed for combat free. Deep in the root, whether by fate or chance, or erring haste, the Trojan drove his lance, then stoop'd and tugg'd with force immense to free the encumbered spear from the tenacious tree. That whom his fainting limbs pursued in vain, his flying weapon might from far attain. Confused with fear, bereft of human aid, then Turnus to the gods, and first to Faunus pray'd. O Faunus, pity! And thou, Mother Earth, where I, thy foster son, received my birth, hold fast the steel. If my religious hand your plant has honour'd, which your foes profaned, propitious hear my prayers, he said, nor with successless vows invoke their aid. The incumbent hero wrench'd, and pulled, and strained, but still the stubborn earth the steel detained. Juturna took her time, and while in vain he strove, assumed mythicus form again, and in that imitated shape restored the despairing prince his Daunian sword. The queen of love, who with disdain and grief saw the bold nymph afford this prompt relief, to assert her offspring with a greater deed, from the tough root of the lingering weapon freed. Once more erect the rival chiefs advance, one trusts the sword, the other the pointed lance, and both resolved alike to try their fatal chance. Meantime imperial Jove to Juno speak, who from a shining cloud beheld the shock. What new arrest, O Queen of Heaven, is sent to stop the fates now labouring in the event? What farther hopes are left thee to pursue, divine Aeneas, and thou knows it too, foredoomed to these celestial seats are due? What more attempts for Turnus can be made, that this thou lingerest in this lonely shade? Is it becoming of the due respect and awful honour of a god elect, a wound unworthy of our state to feel, patient of human hands and earthly steel? Or seems it just the sister should restore a second sword, when one was lost before, and arm a conquered wretch against his conqueror? For what, without thy knowledge and avow, nay more, thy dictate durst Juturna do? At last, in deference to my love, forbear to lodge within thy soul this anxious care. Reclined upon my breast, thy grief unload. Who should relieve the goddess but the god? Now all things to their utmost issue tend, push'd by the fates to their appointed, while leave was given thee, and a lawful hour for vengeance, wrath, and unresisted power. Tossed on the seas, thou couldst thy foes distress, and driven ashore with hostile arms oppress, deform the royal house, and from the side of the just bridegroom tear the plighted bride. Now cease at my command, the Thunderer said, and with dejected eyes this answer Juno made. Because your dread decree too well I knew, from Turnus and from earth unwilling I withdrew. Else should you not behold me here alone, involved in empty clouds, my friends bemoan, but girt with vengeful flames, in open sight, engaged against my foes in mortal fight. 'Tis true, Juturna mingled in the strife, by my command, to save her brother's life, at least to try. But by the Stygian lake, the most religious oath the gods can take, with this restriction, not to bend the bow, or toss the spear, or trembling dart to throw. And now, resigned to your superior might, and tired with fruitless toils, I loathe the fight. This let me beg, and this no fates withstand, both for myself and for your father's land, that when the nuptial bed shall bind the peace, which I, since you ordain, consent to bless, the laws of either nation be the same, but let the Latins still retain their name. Speak the same language which they spoke before, wear the same habits which their grandsires wore. Call them not Trojans, perish the renown and name of Troy. With that detested town, Latium be Latium still, let Alba reign, and Rome's immortal majesty remain. Then thus the founder of mankind replies, unruffled was his front, serene his eyes. Can Saturn's issue, and heaven's other heir, such endless anger in her bosom bear? Be mistress, and your full desires obtain, but quench the choler you foment in vain. From ancient blood the Ausonian people sprung, shall keep their name, their habit, and their tongue. The Trojans to their customs shall be tied, I will myself their common rights provide. The natives shall command, the foreigners subside. All shall be Latium, Troy without a name, and her lost sons forget from whence they came. From blood so mixed a pious race shall flow, equal to gods, excelling all below. No nation more respect to you shall pay, or greater offerings on your altars lay. Juno consents, well pleased that her desires had found success, and from the cloud retires. The peace thus made, the Thunderer next prepares to force the watery goddess from the wars. Deep in the dismal regions void of light, 3 daughters at a birth were born to night. These their brown mother, brooding on her care, endued with windy wings to flit in air, with serpents girt alike, and crowned with hissing hair. In heaven the Dirae called, and still at hand, before the throne of angry Jove they stand, his ministers of wrath, and ready still the minds of mortal men with fears to fill. Whenever the moody sire, to wreak his hate on realms or towns deserving of their fate, hurls down diseases, death, and deadly care, and terrifies the guilty world with war. One sister plague, if these from heaven he sent, to fright Juturna with a dire portent, the pest comes whirling down. By far more slow springs the swift arrow from the Parthian bow, or Sidon yew, when traversing the skies, and drenched in poisonous juice, the sure destruction flies. With such a sudden and unseen a flight, shot through the clouds the daughter of the night, soon as the field enclosed she had in view, and from afar her destined quarry knew, contracted, to the boding bird she turns, which haunts the ruined piles and hallowed urns, and beats about the tombs with nightly wings, where songs obscene on sepulchres she sings. Thus lessened in her form, with frightful cries, the fury round unhappy Turnus flies, flaps on his shield, and flutters o'er his eyes. A lazy chillness crept along his blood, choked was his voice, his hair with horror stood. Juturna from afar beheld her fly, and knew the ill omen by her screaming cry, and stridor of her wings. Amazed with fear, her beauteous breast she beat, and rent her flowing hair. Ah me, she cries, in this unequal strife, what can thy sister more to save thy life? Weak as I am, can I, alas, contend in arms with that inexorable fiend? Now I quit the field. Forbear to fright my tender soul, ye baleful birds of night. The lashing of your wings I know too well, the sounding flight and funeral screams of hell. These are the gifts you bring from haughty Jove, the worthy recompense of my ravished love. Did he for this exempt my life from fate? O hard conditions of immortal state! Though born to death, not privileged to die, but forced to bear imposed eternity, take back your envious bribes, and let me go, companion to my brother's ghost below. The joys are vanished, nothing now remains of life immortal, but immortal pains. What earth will open her devouring womb, to rest a weary goddess in the tomb? She drew a length of sighs, nor more she said, but in her azure mantle wrapped her head, then plunged into her stream with a deep despair, and her last sobs came bubbling up in air. Now stern Aeneas his weighty spear against his foe, and thus upbraids his fear. What farther subterfuge can Turnus find? What empty hopes are harbour'd in his mind? 'Tis not thy swiftness can secure thy flight, nor with their feet, but hands, the valiant fight. Vary thy shape in thousand forms, and dare what skill and courage can attempt in war. Wish for the wings of winds to mount the sky, or hid within the hollow earth to lie. The champion shook his head, and made this short reply: No threats of thine my manly mind can move. 'Tis hostile heaven I dread, and partial Jove. He said no more, but with a sigh repress'd the mighty sorrow in his swelling breast. Then as he roll'd his troubled eyes around, an antique stone he saw, the common bound of neighbouring fields, and barrier of the ground, so vast that 12 strong men of modern days the enormous weight from earth could hardly raise. He heaved it at a lift, and poised on high, ran staggering on his enemy, but so disordered that he scarcely knew his way, or what unwieldy weight he threw. His knocking knees are bent beneath the load, and shivering cold congeals his vital blood. The stone drops from his arms, and falling short for want of vigour mocks his vain effort. And as when a heavy sleep has closed the sight, the sickly fancy labours in the night, we seem to run, and destitute of force, our sinking limbs forsake us in the course. In vain we heave for breath, in vain we cry, the nerves embraced their usual strength deny, and on the tongue the faltering accents die. So Turnus fared, whatever means he tried, all force of arms and points of art employed, the fury flew athwart, and made the endeavour void. 1,000 various thoughts his soul confound. He started about, nor aid nor issue found. His own men stop the pass, and his own walls surround. Once more he pauses, and looks out again, and seeks the goddess charioteer in vain. Trembling he views the thundering chief advance, and brandishing aloft the deadly lance. Amazed he cowers beneath the conquering foe, forgets to ward, and waits the coming blow. Astonished while he stands, and fixed with fear, aimed at his shield, he sees the impending spear. The hero measured first, with narrow view, the destined mark, and rising as he threw, with its full swing the fatal weapon flew. Not with less rage the rattling thunder falls, or stones from battering engines break the walls. Swift as a whirlwind, from an arm so strong the lance drove on, and bore the death along. Naught could his sevenfold shield the prince avail, nor aught beneath his arms the coat of mail. It pierced through all, and with a grisly wound transfixed his thigh, and doubled him to ground. With groans the Latins rend the vaulted sky, woods, hills, and valleys to the voice reply. Now low on earth the lofty chief is laid, and with eyes cast upward, and with arms displayed, and recreant thus to the proud victor prayed: I know my death deserved, nor hope to live. Use what the gods and thy good fortune give. Yet think, oh think, if mercy may be shown. Thou hadst a father once, and hast a son. Pity my sire, now sinking to the grave, and for Anchises' sake old Daunus save. Or if thy vow'd revenge pursue my death, give to my friends my body void of breath. The Latian chiefs have seen me beg my life. Thine is the conquest, thine the royal wife. Against the yielded man 'tis mean ignoble strife. In deep suspense the Trojan seem'd to stand, and, just prepar'd to strike, repress'd his hand. He roll'd his eyes, and every moment felt his manly soul with more compassion melt, when casting down a casual glance he spied the golden belt that glitter'd on his side, the fatal spoils which haughty Turnus tore from dying Pallas, and in triumph wore. Then, roused anew to wrath, he loudly cries. Flames, while he spoke, came flashing from his eyes. Traitor! Dost thou to grace pretend, clad as thou art in trophies of my friend? To his sad soul a grateful offering go. 'Tis Pallas gives this deadly blow. He raised his arm aloft, and at the word, deep in his bosom drove the shining sword. The streaming blood distained his arms around, and the disdainful soul came rushing through the wound. End of Book 12. End of the Aeneid, by Virgil, translated by John Dryden.